It worked. Not a complete disaster this time. How good is that? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Whisky Roundtable, a weekly chat with four idiots in Sydney and some special guests from around the world, poking fun at whiskey, poking fun at ourselves, but most importantly, poking fun at Matt Bailey. And there is a button down there. Just hit the poke Matt Bailey button. We've got Facebook to implement that. We are live on the Oak Barrel Facebook page, on Society Facebook page, and of course the Scotch Malt Whisky Society page. We're also live on the Oak Barrel YouTube, but that's a weird place, so we probably won't look too hard into the comments section there. Before we kick off things tonight, while we like to have quite a lot of fun with this thing we call whiskey, it's not always fun sometimes, and obviously a bit of a disaster happening down at the Adams Distillery this week with a fire, and unfortunately, and most importantly, a young, bright distiller who's now currently still in hospital in Hobart's burn unit. So we do send all our thoughts and prayers to the whole Adams family, the whole Tasmanian whiskey community down there, and particularly to Greg Longmore and his family. And I will post in the comments the link to the GoFundMe, which started this morning, is up to $25,000. So people are getting around it. So great to see. Not explosions, but great to see the community. We're going to approach tonight a little bit differently because we've got a very, very special guest, and we've got people from all over the world tuning in. We've got farms in Victoria at about 400 degrees Celsius. We've got snow-covered houses in Glasgow at about minus 4,000 degrees Celsius. So we're braving the conditions, the weather, and a day where internet just does not want to work for anyone. Facebook implement that. We are live, everyone. That is an audio thing in my ear. That's not working, but there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the round table. Julie Hamilton in particular. What I would like to do is read out your email signature, because I think that's the best way that you get to know someone. So, Julie Hamilton, brand ambassador for Elixir Distillers. And I think while that is quite an apt description, there's a little bit more to that, in fact, of what Elixir Distillers do. So in Elixir Distillers, we are talking about Elements of Islay. We're talking about Great Drams of Scotland. We're talking about Port Askaig. And we're talking about 1920s blenders class. Breaking news, we're talking about distilleries on Islay, the 11th distillery on Islay that's been announced today. But most importantly, the first question I want to kick off, as well as what is in everyone's glass, is, Julie, with the 1920s blenders glass, what is the best way to get them clean?
Just don't. I think if you just don't clean it, that's, it's the equivalent of a walk. You just wipe it.
It's like an infinity glass.
That's it. They're hard as hell to clean. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But you are at home in Glasgow at the moment?
I am. Yes, I am.
And are you in lockdown, or are you just at home because it's snowy outside?
I am in lockdown, and also because it's snowy outside. So it's been snowing for a couple of days now. So it's cold and quite deep snow for a change. So yeah, it's and it's also 8:30 in the morning. So it's a completely different vibe in my house to the one in your houses.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually starting off tonight drinking a Spring Bay, a Tassie whiskey. I don't know if you can see that in the light there, but a Reuben, which is the cask strength port cask. So I don't know if anyone else has got anything in their glass. Julie, I know you're going to try and tell me that's tea or coffee, but what is the fortified element of it?
That's it's cask strength Springbank.
Yeah.
I like to drink it in a pint-sized mug.
That's. I mean, Glencairn is arguably the official glass, but I think the official glass of Campbelltown is the mug, isn't it? That's a
pint tumbler. Yeah.
Pint, yeah. Okay.
That's the one we like to adopt when we go. Yeah.
Bailey, anything in your glass tonight?
Yeah, I'm going a bit old school tonight. I've popped open a 1981 Black Label. So, when it wasn't Black Label, it was just called Old Scotch Whiskey, and I found out from the inside label that it was dumped on 1981. So something a bit old school, something a bit like it used to be.
Yeah, and is that a perfect measure glass as well? I see there, Bailey.
No. Of course, I have to be a little bit on brand. That is a SMWS spirit snifter. So there you go. You're gonna have to endure.
It's very similar, though.
It is very similar. It's probably exactly the same, to be honest.
Can we drink now? Is that okay? Are we allowed to drink?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you, but we all know you're drinking from a half-size bottle of Jack Daniels, so that can be that's a given. Milne, anything in your glass at the moment?
Unusual that it's a half size this week. You know,
It was last week too.
I have Starwood Fortis in the glass.
Oh, lovely.
Nice.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And is it a particular tea or coffee there, Julie? Some sort of exotic crushed beans made by I don't know how to talk about coffee.
Standard strong. That's it. I might, once I get down the coffee, I'll maybe venture for a dram. But yeah, I'll stick to coffee.
I kind of feel you can only be a wanker about one thing. So if we're all whiskey wankers, then at least we can drink some decent coffee. Yeah.
I'm going to come in with a hard disagree on that one, but okay. there's multifaceted wankerism. Don't worry.
Only in the world of Matt Bailey.
I'm not going to deny it. There's no denial.
So, Julie, before we went live on air, I know you've worked very closely with Milne, but you were talking about times with shenanigans that cannot be broadcast live to people with Matt Bailey in places like Islay and Campbelltown and that sort of thing. But you want to tell us a little bit about your journey through whiskey and how it's led you to Elixir Distillers.
Yeah, so, well, apart from being a consumer for a very long time before, I, along with other friends, we started Glasgow's Whisky Club probably about 16, 17 years ago. And at that time, my experience of whiskey was very limited. I drank it, but I didn't know very much about it. I drank blended whiskey and went along a journey with that. And we started Glasgow's Whisky Festival. Excuse me, Glasgow's Whisky Festival. This would have been our 11th year. 12th year in November, but obviously with lockdown we weren't able to run it. So that's probably one of the biggest shows in the UK over, apart from the whiskey show that I now work at with Elixir Distillers. But so
can we just get an action replay on Milne's face then? By the whiskey show.
Well, when I said that he was one of the biggest, and he was. Yeah, really? Is that right?
Yeah, thank you. Milne, you massive knob, you know that, right?
We declared the Royal Wankers at the beginning. Let me have it.
The rivalry continues.
It's still there. I can't believe it's still there.
I know, it's terrible that it's still there.
You're still going strong, but that's good. That was the kind of so while I had a day job, I was doing that, and then for about 6 or 7 years, I was a brand ambassador for Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and that was that was where it kind of led me in. And then I took the leap 2 years ago, and I gave up my day job and made whiskey my day job, and started with Elixir Distillers, and I freelanced with them for about 5 months, and then they took me on permanently. So that's a year and a half now. Although a year of it's been in lockdown, so it's been quite something. But yeah, so that's basically fast track of how I got to here.
Julie, can I just rewinding to one of your first points when you said you started the Whisky Club 16, 17 years ago. Can you sort of paint a portrait of what sort of whiskey appreciation looked like in Glasgow 17 years ago?
In the olden days.
Yeah, well, I mean, like even I could safely say even like 10 years ago in Australia, whiskey appreciation wasn't really a discussion, or and even little whiskey groups didn't exist and things like that. So what did it look? What was that? How did that sort of spawn? And what was that? What did that look like? I'm really fascinated to see because obviously the single malts have exploded since then, and the whole industry has changed radically in that amount of time. So.
Yeah. There was nothing here. That was the thing. The society existed in Edinburgh, and at that time, I think people's association was that it was well, you know what the Vaults is like. It's a beautiful location. It's a lovely venue. It's all wood paneling and Chesterfield sofas, and quite intimidating if you're new to it.
Oh yeah.
And we had nothing like that in Glasgow, and it was my friend Alex Robertson who broached it and said, you know, there isn't anything. How do you fancy like a few of us getting together and doing this? And we put up a sign. He put up a sign in the Pot Still in Glasgow advertising it, and I think there was 8 people at the very first meeting, and we just brought out the same whiskey, you know, like it wasn't, it was just basically people, like-minded people getting together and having a dram together. And then it kind of just grew to, because of where we were in the Pot Still, so brand ambassadors and sales guys and things were always coming through the pub. And I think one of the first ones we did was Glenlivet with Ian Logan. And it just so happened that Ian was in the bar, and he...
Casual first guest there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. He was just like, I've got whiskey in the boot of my car. Do you want me to, do a tasting for you? So it started from that. And now, like, our whiskey club, well, I suppose at the time, the appreciation side of it, people were keen, and people who drank in the Pot Still and the Bon Accord and places like that were whiskey bars had an appreciation and an understanding of it. And then when you had things like the Society and different outlets like that, but not to the extent that it is now. God, it's night and day now.
Yeah.
I find that quite fascinating. A lot of us have been lucky enough to work in whiskey or be around whiskey for a few years now. From my point of view, probably the last decade. And then you have people coming through, and it's hard to explain that things have changed quite dramatically in 5-10 years. And they go, okay, in Australia, but we're talking about Glasgow. Like, this is a pretty close to the hub of where it is, going back, not 50 years, not 60 years, but 20 years. Yeah. And that sort of appreciation didn't exist back then. I find that quite a fascinating concept.
I do. It was there. It just wasn't necessarily on my radar. Or there were groups of people who probably met in whiskey bars, but it wasn't the same principle. There wasn't a whiskey club that was as, to say, casual as probably. It wasn't stuffy, and that was the approach that we wanted to take, where it was friendly and no one was judgy about drinking whiskey, which is a thing you came up against, like people telling you how to drink whiskey and telling you what to do. We don't do that.
I think that's the hardest thing of, it's the same in wine. So you've got a category that's really exciting, but the majority, there's a large chunk of people in there already that you look across and go, oh, that looks pretty scary, because I know nothing, and there's this, it's always the most experienced is often the loudest voice, and so you kind of like, oh, I don't want to talk to you because I know nothing. I remember my first tasting. I sat next to a master of wine and a CEO of a wine company, and I just was silent the whole time through. I was like, don't say a thing, like you're gonna screw this up. So don't let them know you know nothing.
I don't think I spoke for for the first 3 years when I first started going to ambassador talks and masterclasses. I just sat and listened because I was always super scared of saying the wrong thing. So it's really daunting when you first get into it. And look at this now. You can't shut me up.
I mean, how did you manage that within a club? Because it's you see sort of now, and certainly through social media, sort of clubs and groups and things. You've got a large mass of really experienced people that are helping develop people up, but you've also got a large group of people with a strong opinion, some with experience and some without, that the loudest voice wins quite often. And so and then there's that sort of element of being supportive of people that are in a different place in their journey to what someone else is. Did you find that in a smaller sort of club setting a hard thing to get people to kind of support each other through the journey, or was it quite a sort of collaborative, supportive group because you're actually in person?
I think that from the get-go, everyone who was involved in it wasn't being the loudest voice. I think, you know, I think we were all like on a kind of equal par. Well, no, maybe that's not true. Actually, that's absolutely not true, because I hadn't a clue what I was talking about, and there were people who did. But we all learned together, and I think I don't know whether I'm so immersed, or I was so immersed in it that I didn't notice that. But I think it is friendly enough, and we keep it light enough and educational enough, because we have brand ambassadors that come along. So we do two in the club. We do 2 meetings a month. So we do one that the Whisky Club committee run, and each take a turn of introducing a bottle and telling people what the whiskey is. And then it's social, you know, like, so in between each whiskey, everyone sits back down and talks to each other. It's not lectury, you know, death by PowerPoint style. And then we have a brand ambassador come along and host the kind of mid-month one. And like that, again, it's, you know, I think at the start we would, I mean, looking back, I remember there being death by PowerPoint, and we were just all sitting with 6 whiskies in front of us, like, oh my God. So, you know, everybody learns as they go along, and brand ambassadors don't do that anymore, you know. Yeah. So I think, I don't really know. I don't really know if I just didn't notice, or whether we are actually really quite chilled and friendly. So I think we are. Do you know that way? But I think the environment dictates it. So if you've got experts who take over and all the rest of it, then you're always going to get that, and you'll have loud voices, but they normally get kind of dampened down when everybody else is the same. That, I don't know if that's.
Now, Julie, you would have actually, this is just a question that came up from something you just said. You would have seen like the evolution of, in the last 10 years, of a brand ambassador. What's one of the biggest differences that you're seeing of brand ambassadors and the way they present from 10 years ago?
Again, so this is maybe just my experience, but there were brand ambassadors that are the same as they've always been, but you did have people who were quite, you know, they had a presentation and they had a set way of doing things, whereas now I think it's a little bit more relaxed, and there's more conversation, and well, apart from now, because we're doing it on Zoom, we're doing whiskey tastings on like this. So
it's another evolution, isn't it?
Absolutely. And who thought we would be here? You know, when we first started doing these, it was just daunting, because you've got a screen of 35 people all muted, some with their cameras off, and you're just presenting in your house to a laptop. Is, you know, quite different from standing in a bar or a restaurant, or, you know, a venue that you're actually able to interact with people. I think so. In the past 10 years, I think people have developed style that's maybe not necessarily as stuffy. So I think trying to show that whiskey doesn't have to be serious, and you have to learn, and, you know, it is enjoyable and people can be relaxed and drink it as well. I think that style kind of comes through for folk.
I think we've all been in situations before where we did actually wish we had a Zoom mute all function at a bar. So some things have changed for the better, I think.
Now we'll all be looking for that remote control when we go back to land.
Everyone shut up. You know.
Unfortunately, we give all of the control to Scotty every night, and he can actually once. So
well, I learned pretty early on during these chats, and a lot of Zoom chats, that if I didn't have the control and the mute button, then I would be muted pretty quickly. So the only way that I get a word in is if I take control. But it's a really good concept. And Julie, you mentioned that, you know, a large part of your brand ambassadorial career so far has been in lockdown in times of pandemic. We've had a fair few come through onto this stream in the past year or so. So apart from coming on and saying g'day to us on a Wednesday night, what are brand ambassadors, you know, doing through times of lockdown, and what does that look like in terms of you know, stuff that you can do at home?
So the thing that it has made me is accessible to all over the world, because, you know, we're now all doing this, so I'm able to come on here at 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, and be in Australia or in Taiwan or in Canada, or so from that perspective, it's absolutely opened things up. You know, ordinarily we would need to travel to do this kind of thing. But
it's a nightmare getting money out of Secunda, so it's going to be so much harder now to be saying, "Oh, I need to fly here." It's like, no, Zoom.
No, you don't. Yeah, it's so from that perspective, I'm doing a lot of virtual events, a lot of virtual tastings, whiskey clubs, and yeah, I'm able to do that. So a lot of my time is spent making up little miniatures of whiskey and turning it into packs and sending out to people, and yeah, coming up with new ideas. And the other thing we're getting just now is some time to plan and organise ourselves, which, you know, we all know what it's like. Ordinarily, you've just not got time to do anything. So the admin is going to be absolutely outstanding by the time we come out of lockdown again, I hope.
It's an interesting one. I got pretty bored with, you know, pouring big bottles of whiskey into lots of smaller bottles of whiskey. And I was like, gee, I'm sick of this. And then we're lucky enough in Sydney to be able to host live tastings again under, you know, certain capacities and that sort of thing. And then I get to the end of it and I have to clean up all the glassware and put the tables and chairs back. And I was like, oh, can I get back to small bottles? That was much more fun than this.
I can sit in the house and sort that out while I'm watching TV or, I think there's things, the grass is always greener, isn't it? You know, I'm sitting just now and I can't wait to get back and be hosting live events and be doing whiskey festivals and things like that again. And then you'll get to the end of the day when everybody's asking for that last dram and you just want them all to go home because it's time. And you'll be thinking, God, I could just switch my machine off at the end and not have to listen to all of that chat anymore. So yeah.
That is the good bits. It's the trying to leave the pub and, you know, when you can see there's a crowd of people there just waiting to talk. And it's like, I need to go home. And it's just like, cool, well, I've got to go.
So what did you just say there? That feeling of trying to leave the pub? I'm unfamiliar. What's that concept?
I've never experienced that myself. I'm not really sure what we're talking about.
No, I've been told to leave, but actively trying to leave. Want to say good day to some people listening across the channels today, to James Finnegan. Yao from Elixir was in a little bit earlier. Bree from the Backwoods Distillery, Bree Atwood from Backwoods, which is actually not too far from where Alex is recording from a hay shed tonight. Where are you, Alex, by the way?
So I'm in Gonong in Victoria at the moment. I drove 9 hours today to get home to the farm. We got home at just before 2:00 this afternoon. And as you can tell, we went straight to work. So I'm down here to help Dad with some cattle work that's going to happen over the next 3 days because there's no grain on the property at the moment. We've got to get all the cattle and sheep sorted before we start cropping again.
Beauty.
But I will be in Yakandandra next Wednesday, I think.
Yeah. I wonder what special guests we can have on next week. But also g'day to Vicky Dahlenburg and to Sue Middleton. Once again, Andy and Alex's mums have come along for the party, and my parents are too busy at the pub doing trivia. That's all right.
Hi, Mum.
Julie, I'd like to talk a little bit about Elixir distillers and what that means, because I think in Australia a lot of people will be familiar with the brands but not necessarily the company behind it, as the various independent bottlers. But then I don't know if you can touch on the announcement that came about 4 hours before today, before we went live, in certain distilleries that have taken a long time to plan that may have been given green lights.
Yeah, so Elixir, we'll start with the bottling. Elixir Distillers are an independent bottler, so we bottle 3 different labels: Single Malts of Scotland, Elements of Islay, and Port Askaig. And so we bottle from 2 of the brands. Port Askaig and Elements of Islay are obviously Islay whiskies. Elements we bottle from every distillery, Port Askaig just from a few. And Single Malts of Scotland we bottle from a range of different distilleries. So, we release whiskies at different ages. We've got different labels under Single Malts of Scotland. So we've got reserve casks, marriage of casks, single casks and director's casks. So they are a range of ages and types. And yeah, that's pretty much the bottling side. And the distillery, yeah, we've had the go-ahead. So the distillery will be starting soon, hopefully. It will be the first distillery that you come to on the Southern Distillery Road. So it will sit just before Lafroig on that road towards. So you'll have Lafroig, Lagavulin and Ardbeg. So we'll be the one before that, which is exciting.
And for context, that's at least 5 years, 6 years in the making. You know, it's
2014, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been delays from COVID relation in terms of sort of getting the community together, but you know, I've been over here for 3 years almost now, and I remember being on Islay with Sukhinder, and we were walking around the site searching for water and for water sources, and literally and it was a very wet, cold winter's day, and we were just wandering around this field, just going, "Do you think there's water here? Nope. Is there water here? Nope." That's back and forth with a farmer, just trying to see what's available. So, yeah, it's incredible to see finally after all this time and effort.
Into that, Andy, to put some context into that, there's been some distilleries for our Australian watchers. There's been some distilleries that have planned, opened in Australia, and since closed again in that time frame, and had releases out. So that's a lot. That's a lot going on.
I know. Things do take a bit longer here.
So for those who haven't been to Islay, it's going to be near Port Ellen, and basically the distillery's on the southern island. And I, when I was first in Islay, did it on a bike, so they're not very far away from each other. Like they're just that row of Lafroig, Ardbeg, and Lagavulin, very, very close together. But one thing we haven't said is actually the name of the distillery, because I think it should be said in a genuine Glaswegian accent. The name of the distillery. So if you could just rattle off, what is the 11th distillery on Islay? I think. Is it the 11th?
It will be the 11th distillery, because Port Ellen will be reopened by then. We don't actually have a name for the distillery yet. It is on the farmyard.
Good try.
I was going for an exclusive there, but that's all right.
There's a folder somewhere on Julia's desk with a list of names, and I mean, we're okay with even a list of names would be fine at this point. Or
I don't have a list of names, but what I can tell you is the land that the distillery will be built on is called Farkin.
What do you mean you don't have a name?
There will definitely be a blend. There surely will be a blended whiskey called Farkin Good Whiskey.
Well, I think the marketing potential for that, another Farkin whiskey, waiting for that whiskey would be wonderful.
Great.
But apparently not. Yeah.
Well, you could do it the same way that was it the Rassay distillery did it. It was while we wait, and just while we fucking wait.
Just still waiting on this fucking whiskey, and I mean, really, it's endless. It's absolutely endless. But yeah, apparently that idea has not been taken on board at all. So I was really pushing for it, but yeah, it's not happening. But so we don't. There are a few contenders, but yeah, not anything yet. That's still to come. But people on the island refer to it as Farkin Distillery, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Are they saying not another fucking distillery?
Well, there's an element of that, isn't there?
Yeah.
You're always going to get that, but
especially probably from the old crew, the Bemores and Lafroigs, and especially how close it's going to be to Lafroig. Sort of that. Yeah, it's awfully close to Lafroig, isn't it? I think.
Room for everyone, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely an exciting time to be part of the company, to see how this is all going to
for sure.
Now,
progress.
Out of the bottling brands that Elixir has, the ones we see most prominently in Australia are Elements of Islay and Port Askaig. So obviously Islay focused. Now the company's gone and built a distillery on Islay. Is it safe to say that there might be some Islay fans in Elixir distillers? Is that like a favourite style of whiskey? And I think we've all got our own experiences and things, but like, what is it that brings you back to that island and brings the company back to the island?
Just the very style and nature and quality of the whiskey, really. Sukhinder, I would say it's safe to say that Sukhinder is a big Islay whiskey fan. It's one that's definitely close to our hearts, and even with the Single Malts of Scotland range, we bottle Islay whiskies under that label as well. So there are certain distilleries that we bottle a lot of just because of the quality of it. It's just so good. So yeah, it's a bit of a passion, Islay whiskey.
It's fucking delicious whiskey.
It's fucking delicious. Yeah.
It's my favorite word, guys. I'm sorry. I'm just going to go to town on this. I love it.
No, it would be great, wouldn't it? They would be like, here's that Farkin brand ambassador again.
Usually it's about Matt Bailey.
Yeah. but with more use.
Sorry, it's the country air. I'm feeling frisky right now. Sorry.
It is a really interesting point, and it's a little bit of an open-ended question that I want to throw to anyone who wants to put into this. You mentioned Port Ellen's getting rebuilt, and there are certain things that people expect from Port Ellen that they are going to try and replicate in whatever that it looks like. Whatever this distillery is called in the end, it's a blank slate. So, do you have any insight or speculation into what sort of new make character you would go in? Actually got me thinking this afternoon, if someone said, go start a distillery somewhere, anywhere in the world, where would you do it? And what sort of new make style would you be looking for? So first to Julie, but anyone else who's got maybe an answer to that, but like any insight of what, anything that you could do apart, like at a base level, is it going to be a peated Islay whiskey, do you think, or?
I don't know the answer to that. So for me to say Port, sorry, I was just come on and said Port Allen for the name of the distillery. Excellent. I think that when the time comes, it will be people who have a real keen interest in whiskey. So they'll be looking to maybe be. Oh, I don't know. I'm answering a question that I don't know the answer to. Experimental? I don't know. I don't know what the proposed style will be, but it'll be good. I can give you that.
Yeah.
That's probably all I can give you. But yeah, I don't know, and I don't know where I would start my own. Maybe Campbelltown if I had a choice, but that's just a given, really.
Yeah.
I think it's tough. Like, if you said pick out what Sukhinder would want in a whiskey, then you could sit and go, okay, he loves that delicate smoke of Port Ellen and that fruitiness. He loves the tropical character of Bermours. He loves that rich sherry maltiness that you get from Old Laphroaig and Lagavulin, and so there's lots of elements that you can go, okay, you really like this, you really like this, you really like this, and you can pick it out to his style. But it's not just him that's the distillery. I think I've started, I started this a long time ago, but playing the guessing game of who will be the staff at that distillery, and I've got 3 or 4 names down for the master distiller or distillery manager.
Is that a bit like fantasy football league? Where
yes. I'm really cool like that, where I just write lists of companies that I'm not involved in.
Let's start an odds for it. We can make a bit of money on the side running a bookies for this.
But I think that will be the tell-all, and I'm thinking partly of his favourite distillers, but then his biggest influences and friends on Islay as well, and so you sort of look around across all of that. And so you go, okay, right, well, if you came, it will be this style, but if you came, it will be this style. And so I think when that's announced, there's probably a little bit more of an idea of where the direction is going, because it will be based on that person's skill set.
it is obviously very early in the process, because what has happened today, what's quite exciting, is the permission to go and build something and put it together. So it's way too early to sort of talk, but I thought it was quite an interesting little brain exercise when I was thinking about it. Julie, you mentioned Campbelltown, and I love those whiskies that represent the place and the town. And so I was thinking, if you said I had to go build a distillery, I'd go out to a little town called Tarana, which is just before Bathurst, about 3 hours west of where I am, and make a whiskey that was, it's a very dry, hilly, but sort of very dry, typical Australian place. And I'd love to see a very light, grassy, malt-forward Australian whiskey in the style of like a Teaninich or Linkwood, with maybe a bit of funk, but without the smoke. So maybe like a Brookladdick, Isla Barley series funk from out there. And I just thought, God, that would be so much fun to do. But don't know if anyone else has anything any whimsical, distillery ideas.
I'm with you there, Scotty. I think something's light and grassy, but takes on that takes on a sense of the land and place of where it's coming from is what's most important. And I think that's what it will probably show in the end. I mean, it's rather than trying to be something it's not, which is kind of an obvious statement, but yeah, something I think it's that movement towards authenticity rather than anything else, I guess, in their spirit.
Just fucking good whiskey.
Well, Alex, you can't tell me, and a shout out to Lee Atwood, who says he can't believe your family has Wi-Fi in your hay shed. But
man.
You can't tell me you're not sitting there right now looking at that hay shed going, oh, I could fit a still over that side and maybe a condenser in that corner. What do you think the whiskey would taste like distilled in that hay shed?
In this hay shed, probably sheep shit at this stage. Not taking a page out of Peter Bignell's book or anything. But there are some sheep yards just to my right over here. And there's cattle yards just behind me, behind this shed. And then Dad's workshop there, which would be perfect for a lovely little still in there right now.
What was it? Icelandic one, the flocky that uses sheep shit? Was it that one?
Yeah.
Flocky,
that was
whatever,
amazing. Yeah. I haven't been able to get it for a while. We used to have it on the back bar at Milne all the time. So,
from my experience, Peter works better than shit than Flocky did. I think particularly some of those early releases were notable, and that's probably the notable. Make some other excellent whiskey, but some very notable early releases.
And just to reply to Lee, I will post on my Instagram the setup that I've currently got going right now. My laptop's on an oil drum. I'm sitting on a shed stool, and I've got a 40-gallon bucket just sitting next to me with my whiskey and my water next to it. It was quite the production just to get this set up straight out of the paddock this afternoon. So,
what is the difference between a stool and a shed stool?
Generally, there's no foam in a shed stool, and that they're torn apart and come out of maybe a classroom from 40 years ago somewhere, and it's just been picked up on the side of the road and thrown into a shed. And half the time, if you were in any decent clothes, you wouldn't sit on the stool, but in a shed, you sit on it. It's quite a setup. I'll post it on my Instagram. It's quite funny. I also have bug spray with me and I'm just like spraying on either side.
Scotty, shall we press?
I think so. We're into that sort of part of the world. And Alex has just reacted to a comment. If you're listening back to this on the podcast, you would have seen this comment. And Lee commented, and Alex, your internet is still better than Andy's. Well, Andy's actually upgraded from Bondi internet to North Shore internet. It's slightly better, but
slightly better.
So
day by day.
So we're into this sort of like philosophical part of the evening by accident, but here we go. So we're going to segue into the Proust questionnaire element. And yes, I do know it's pronounced Proust, but I'm Australian and it's Proust, so fight me, Australian. From our friends and sponsors at whiskyarden.com.au, a little bit of a fun little Q&A that goes around based on the very famous old parlour game and adapted to whiskey. Did anyone in the panel have a particular question they wanted to throw out to Julie today? Or shall I pick one?
Proust is always my favourite, so I know them all off by heart because it's my favourite whiskey interview I've ever done, as I said before last week. I have a million, but I'll throw it out to Matt and Andy.
Well, actually, maybe do we comment on something we've been talking about, and Julie to sort of throw you in the deep end and give you absolutely no warning about this one.
Excellent.
If I could ask you this question, what is your favourite distillery name?
Ooh.
Fucking distillery.
Technically, it doesn't exist yet.
If only that was real, Alex.
Yeah.
If only it was real. My favourite distillery name? I don't know. My favourite distillery is Springbank, so probably my favourite distillery name would be Springbank then. But that's not very... I can't give you a reason round about that. I don't know. Let me think about that. What's your favourite distillery name?
I'm a big fan of Linkwood personally. I love the way that it sounds. It's not overly, 18th century, and it's not overly modern. It also looks really good. It's got like tall letters on it. So like when it's written on a page with good text, it looks beautiful. I can pronounce it as well. So that's always a bonus. But I think probably, again, one of my favorite distilleries, but Linkwood it's just, I love the way it sounds and looks.
It's Auchentoshan for the opposite reason. It's completely iconic of its location and place. It's like, you're in no question marks of where this is and where it's from. But also you've nailed it if you can then pronounce the name.
My favourite is Freud, just for the mispronunciation.
I was just going to say that probably would be the next one after Auchentoshan, wouldn't it? Yeah. Avangerag, that's the one.
that and Altavania.
Aye, yeah.
Altavania.
Altavania.
It's always the Bahane.
Thrusk as well. That's another one that's never pronounced correctly. My I did a tasting one time, and I was talking about Askaig and Askaig the whole way through my tasting, and a guy who was in the audience when I was going round. So like I'll introduce whiskey and then I go around the tables and talk to people and because people won't necessarily talk to you in a crowd, but they'll talk to you at their table type thing. And a guy handed me a mobile phone, and it was his pal in Mull, and he said, you're not saying it right, it's Lechik. And I was like, seriously, you've just... And he said, yeah, you're not saying it right. So Lechik is how you pronounce Lady. It's how it's written.
But it isn't, and it isn't, because I remember Billy was trying to work out the correct way to pronounce this, and we asked two people at the distillery, and one said Lecheg and one said Lechek. And you're like,
absolutely.
Another one, and again, is going to be soon to be neighbours of yours, Julie. I was always told Kalila, because the Isla in Isla, the ILA comes from the old spelling of Isla. So when I was there, they were saying Kalila. Then everyone else has said Ela, like Kalila. But I just have it so ingrained because some old bloke at the Ardview Inn in Port Ellen told me it was Kalila. Probably having the Aussie bloke on.
I told you what, gave you a bum steer, and you've kept it ever since.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to tell this Australian guy that's how you say it, and then Kalila.
Years later.
People correct me on Kalila all the time, and they'll say, "Oh, right, Kalila," and I'm like, "No, it's Kalila. It's that. It's not Kalila." But yeah,
I can say as well in this sort of discussion, my least favorite distillery name, and it's not because they make bad whiskey, but it just catches me out every bloody time, is Glenmurray. And every time I just go to say Glenmore, and I know that I'm doing it wrong. I know how it's just so obvious the way it is, and I'm just like, just change the name. Like, it's just pissing me off at this point in time. Make some excellent whiskies, but it's when you see it in a sentence, it's the only thing you think about. The rest of the because I can't get it wrong. It just ruins every sentence that's ever been written.
They probably will. I mean, if you give them a phone, I'm quite sure, like, if they're going to do any rebranding, they'll take that into consideration, that, it's tough to pronounce.
Yeah. They don't take Scotty's calls anymore.
They know where the mute button is.
You'll maybe get passed around the office. Folk will say, that's your brother on the phone, and people will talk to you.
Anyone else want to throw one of the questions out there, or should I pick another one?
Alex, you had one, didn't you?
If you could work at one distillery, which one would it be and why?
Oh God, let's see, Matt. I can't answer Springbank for everything, can I? If I could, genuinely, if I could work anywhere, it would be for Springbank. They make you move to Campbelltown though, so that's quite a move from Glasgow to move to Campbelltown. But I love the way that I love the production process and the way that they do everything. From everything is done in that distillery and the ethos behind it. Yeah, that would be the place that I would work, is Springbank. At that and the new distillery on Islay. The new distillery on Islay. I'd love to work
There it is.
Sorry, but
was that a job application I just heard in there? Just
in case MD's watching, that's, I would love to work there. Somewhere with a lovely view. Springbank doesn't have a lovely view. That's the only thing. It doesn't have a lovely view. But Ardnahoe Distillery, if you've seen, and Kalila as well, the view from the still houses in these distilleries are absolutely outstanding. So maybe something like that as well.
I'd have to work at Brooklady only because I love their sort of production process, and the layout of that distillery is fantastic.
Yeah.
Or I'd want to work somewhere like Mortlach, where the distillation process is so stupid that it just makes sense. No one can understand it, but only like the distillers can. And even if they try and explain it, it's kind of like doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
All right, I've got another one.
Can I answer that one just quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because you don't have the mute button, and I want to have my say. No, but because I was thinking about this again the other day, and I would say Springbank as well, but I would almost be a little bit of a fraud with this accent, trying to stand up in front of someone and talk about Springbank. Would I do so? But I love the way that certain distilleries, and we see it in Australia as well, when you come, you don't get welcome to the distillery, you get welcome to the town. And so it's definitely a distillery like that. But I think Wolfburn, I'd love to work up there, because as you welcome people up there, it's such a different part of the world. It's still on mainland. And I think if you're going to Wolfburn, you're not doing an hour. You're taking the day to look around Thurso and that sort of stuff. So I think that would be a really great distillery to work at. Any single casks or higher allocations from Wolfburn Whisky will be greatly appreciated.
Speaking of that, Mark, if you watch this, I'm sorry, I will get back to your email.
Daddy, if you're watching, yep.
Yeah,
I refuse to call him that. I refuse to.
Too bad.
Too bad.
Andy or Matt, do you have Andy, do you have a distillery we've heard from Matt?
Right, which I've already forgotten now what the question is. The distillery that I would most like to work at?
Yeah.
If you say Speyburn, we're booting you from the channel.
I can do that. I have the power.
It's so big, I can have the run of the road.
Go on, get him out.
Casual flex.
Do you realize that we're all flexing really hard right now with all the distilleries we're talking about that we've been to?
I haven't been to Wolfburn.
I've been to Wolfburn. Anyway, sorry, Andy.
It probably would be Kilhoman, because I think they do everything. So it's not just the case of you're on there and here it is and off you go. There's the integration, the active part of every role. I'd love to say one like Anok or Nokdu is very similar, but everyone there is ex-engineers and carpenters and electricians and things, and so I would be demasculated quite quickly by the fact that I was didn't know how to hammer a nail. Whereas I think Anthony Wills shouts at me regularly enough anyway that I would just fit in, because he could just carry on abusing me in his normal fashion.
He knows your name already, so you would be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
you over there. Alex, did you have another question you wanted to throw out there?
She's muted.
We've lost you there a little bit. I can see the mouth moving.
There we go. It's just because there's motorbikes and stuff going past. One of my favorite questions, I have two out of the Proust, was who is your whiskey hero?
My whiskey hero? Oh my God. Bessie Williams. Bessie Williamson is my whiskey hero.
Yeah. Awesome.
Those at home and listening, she is?
Bessie Williamson was the secretary, became personal assistant to Ian Hunter at Lafroig Distillery, and when he passed away, he left it to her. So she was instrumental in introducing Lafroig to America. She took it over during Prohibition. She was pretty awesome. She took over the Lafroig Distillery and ran it. So she wasn't the first female distillery manager. She's noted as in places, but she wasn't. There were others, but she was so well loved on the island and so appreciated. And I think she was, she's definitely an icon in the whiskey industry. And she's,
There's some pretty good stories about Bessie during sort of like years of austerity and world wars, managing to get Lafroig put on certain lists as like key providers and getting raw materials when they probably shouldn't have been going to Lafroig. So I think she at least I never knew her. I wasn't alive back then, but from what I've read and what people have told me, very instrumental in there being a Lafroig existing in 2021.
Yeah.
It was the first female as distiller or distillery manager or distiller was Cardew, wasn't it?
Cardew, yeah. It was two women at Cardew. Yeah, that's right. But Bessie, it just depends where you're reading it. But yeah, she wasn't the first, but she was, to use the word instrumental again, she was instrumental in the whiskey industry at that time.
Very cool.
And taking all over the world, basically. She was pioneer.
Yeah. Excellent. I want to say a quick good day.
Guys, who's your whiskey hero?
Ooh. We asked the question.
Yeah. Who's running?
None of us expected this. Come on, mine's sentimental and soppy in a way, but it's Sekinda.
See, well done. I should have said that, shouldn't I?
Right.
The royalties have been well paid now.
So that's the second job application we've had live on.
I know. I was like, damn it! I just went for Bessie Williamson. I should have gone for Sekinda. Ollie, go for Ollie Chilton.
Okay. Oh, come on! I've got a standard. No, I mean purely because I wouldn't be in the job that I am without what I learned from him, and it's sort of in terms of someone to learn and get tutors from. There's icons and things that I can look at and go, I totally admire and love with what these master distillers and different people in history of whiskey have done. But if I can look back and say, I can point the finger at one person that, there's a collective group at Specialty Drinks and Elixir, but there's one man that ignites a passion and he did that for me.
Very cool.
That and my mum, because she occasionally listens.
Yeah, she's tuning in right now.
Look, it is a tough question, and maybe moving forward we should post these in advance in the email correspondence, so we're not putting on the spot. Maybe that's something. But no, I kind of like the quick answer and then the immediate regret when the person you thought of you should have mentioned. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Is everybody else getting away with answering this question? Is it just Andy you're going to make answer it?
Well, Alex, do you want to go?
No, you go, Scotty.
See, I don't think I have one. It would be like a lot closer to home in terms of people that I've, when I was quite young and getting into whiskey and knowing nothing, that sort of took the time to sort of stop and have a bit of a chat with this little idiot, who was, buzzing around a whiskey fair or something, trying to get excited about it. So there's a lot of people that played that role. I think, I spent a bit of time with Mark Nicholson down in Tasmania. For those of you who may not know, he took me up to the Lark Peat Bog and we did a day up there many years ago, and that was just sort of an experience that I hadn't had in Australia before. But even I think without blowing smoke up society, Andrew Durbidge, who was, is the director of, I forget his exact title, but the cellar master, that's the word, of SWS in Australia. And, going back 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, after a fair, sitting at a pub and, being nice enough to take the time and just explain where things had come from and how they got to here, and, and the role that he played in bringing whiskey into Australia, and much, Julie, with what you were talking about with the Glasgow Whisky Club, just the way that he had been in that very formative part of whiskey that I didn't see and I'll never see. So people like that, for me, I think probably don't get enough credit from people like myself as and it's intangible in what they did, but certainly have shaped my whiskey journey.
Yeah, awesome.
Matt?
I don't know.
Now you can't say Durbage.
No. You've well and truly covered Durbs. I was going to say though, one of my whiskey heroes is someone I've actually never met, but has obviously left an indelible mark on the local community as well. Scott, to your point, would be someone like Norman Case. I'd have to raise a glass to and say like what he did for where whiskey is as we know it today, especially even Scotch whiskey. More particularly of appreciation of Scotch whiskey in Australia would be someone like Norman. Internationally though, only because I've had the privilege of hanging out with him a few times, and both professionally and outside of events, which has been great, is Dr. Lumsden, who I've learned a lot off, and he's a total legend, and he's just been someone who's been I've had the opportunity to see most years over the last 7, 8, 9 years, and total legend, and it's those kind of names I think would come to mind first, but it's something I'd have to think about a bit more further. Yeah.
Are we giving points for after parties then as well?
No, I guess not. Let's leave that out then.
Can we all just guess that
moving on, leave that one there.
Alex is Dave Broom?
No.
Okay.
No. He's one of my heroes, and same with Becky, and you know how much I fangirl over almost everyone in the whiskey industry. But for me, it's distillers. Every day they're just plugging away, making the wonderful stuff that we drink, and I have so much admiration for them. So it's always distillers.
Yeah.
I think everything. They're just all amazing.
Yeah, I think good shout on Becky as well. Who was our guest from last week. What she did with ScotchWhiskey.com, and I almost, now that I've met her virtually and had a bit of a chat, she almost gets removed from that international conversation. But when I didn't know her from a bar of soap, she was just this byline, this name. That was someone who I looked up big when I was, in that industry as a writer before I was in whiskey. So yeah, I think good shout there, Alex. I think she gets a mention.
Yeah, that was good.
All righty. Well, look, we are at the hour mark. So I am going to ask the final question of tonight and it's actually very similar to the final question of last night. Now, Julie, obviously you've worked closely with Matt and Milne over the years and been acquaintances and colleagues and all that sort of stuff. Did you know that Andy Milne's middle name is Puddles?
Did not.
My mum texted me about this one last week. Did that one from her for 5 years, and didn't quite last on that.
As soon as the borders go down, I'm going to go on so the borders open rather. I'm going to go on a Scottish tour, just with a Puddles T-shirt, just so that I can go to as many distilleries as I can, just drill home the Puddles name, because I think it's such, and I forget who it was, but from episode about 17 last year, thank you so much for bringing Puddles into my life. You don't know how much joy you've given me and continue to give me by revealing that fact. But Julie, thank you so much for being so generous with your time at what is now 9:30 a.m. I believe over there.
I just at work.
Yeah, excellent. So, thank you for sharing breakfast with us. And sharing the snow. It's we can't see. It's got quite dark in the farm. So, Alex, or just the doors have been closed. But it's quite special. And touching upon a few of the things we mentioned tonight. But it's very rarely you get to have a whiskey chat in 40 degrees Celsius in hay bales and in whatever it is, ungodly small number in snow out there. So, real pleasure. And thank you for spending the time. And we look forward with bated breath for whatever the 11th distillery on Islay sounds like, looks like, and most importantly, tastes like.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It's been good to see you.
You too, Julie. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Julie. Pleasure.
See you soon.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for watching. A quick update: we did launch the podcast series, so you can actually search that on Spotify if you want now. We're just taking Apple. It'll just take a little while, but this episode will be edited down from this show and probably be up in the next couple of days. But you can also go to the Whisky Roundtable Facebook page to see the links to all the episodes there. So thank you very much, and we will be back next week, I believe, with our first Australian special guest/guests of the year, depending on who Alex can wrangle into a room.
Depending on who wants to get drunk with me next Wednesday night.
Yeah. Throw your hands up. Put it in the comments. Throw it in the comments.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, gang.